Welcome to Holistic Podcasting. I'm your host and producer, Kristin Chadwick. After being in the podcast industry since 2016, I am determined to inspire you to start, grow, and maintain your podcast through a holistic approach. If you're an entrepreneur, coach, author, or leader, you need a podcast. And friend, I'm here for you as an experienced podcast coach for over 6 years, working with numerous top podcasts and hosts. Your voice needs to be heard, and your story needs to be known. Through holistic podcasting, you will learn how to market your business coming from an aligned and centered place and through intentional strategy. Thanks for listening to the show. Here we go. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Holistic Podcasting. I am your host, Kristin Chadwick, your podcast coach. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to the show. I have seen such an increase of downloads, so I first want to just say thank you for all of your shares, your listens, and yes, you know that I value that so much. Okay, life is going pretty awesome over here. We have started our podcast boot camp from idea to launch with my 9 incredible powerhouse women, and it has been such a gift already. We are only a couple weeks in, and I am so stoked to be able to get these women's voices out into the world. So if you missed the boat on this one, don't you fret. It is coming around again in the next couple of months. And so I want you to just keep your ears tuned. And if you want to join us on the next round, please send me a message and I would love to put you on the waiting list. Okay, so today's episode is really going to be for anybody who is, again, starting a podcast, because that's where I'm in right now. I am in the season of helping many people, not only my podcast boot campers, but also my one-on-one clients. And something has come up a couple times where I feel like this needs to be hit on. And that is really clarifying your message as a podcaster. So this is for you. If you know you are a yes when it comes to podcasting. Yes, I want to start a podcast. Yes, I want to share about all the things. Yes, I want to use my voice. This is for you. Because this may be for you if you are somebody who is like, yep, I want to start a podcast and I have no idea what I want to talk about. Or you could be saying, I want to start a podcast, but there's so many things that I love, that I'm passionate about, and I don't know which one to hone in on. This is for you if you want to start a podcast and you are nervous to take that first step of commitment into the podcasting space, because what if a year from now you don't want to continue talking about that? Maybe you want to talk about something different. In all of these places, I just want to say it is okay where you're at. You can feel this tension, but don't let it keep you stuck. Okay? So as I was processing through this, as many people are feeling that yes, and yet they don't know exactly where they're headed. And so I want to hit on this today because it's super important. We all have something to share, and we all have multi-passions, and we might all have 2 or 3 different areas that we could instantly drop everything and teach and speak on, right? So it is okay. And I want to just bring to your attention right now that sometimes that will prevent you from actually starting. Let me tell you a little story. Back in the day, 2020, when I broke out on my own and was like, I want to start a podcast. Y'all, I had no clue exactly what I wanted to talk about. I was a former personal trainer, turned podcaster, turned producer, turned show notes writer. I loved everything about learning about wellness. I loved talking about my own health journey, my kids' health journey. I love talking about parenting. I love talking about marriage and fighting for marriages. Y'all, I had so many passions, and I still do. And I want to encourage you to just start. Start. What is it right now that you want to be an expert in this season? As I started in 2020, I knew I wanted to specifically start by talking about how do we handle quarantine? How do we stay active in quarantine? Remember that? And I was determined I was not going to be a lazy bum by the end of it. And that was where my heart was. And as time progressed and people continued to say, hey, we want to hear more of you and Joshua, my husband. And so we sat down and we did a couple of recordings about parenting. We did a couple of recordings about marriage. And again, people would give feedback. We would shift. We would go one way. We would go another way. But the point is that I pressed record. And this is from somebody who, this is not my natural tendency to get behind a mic and share my deep internal thoughts, because I am an internal processor. I am not an external processor. Y'all, it terrified me to press record when I didn't quite know the direction where I wanted my podcast to go, but I knew that I needed to just start. And I can say too, that in that beginning, it was so helpful to have my husband there to process a little bit, to have him kind of harness me back in and pull things out from me. So sometimes it's having somebody in your studio with you, drawing out questions. And I will say that the more you record, the more practice you get behind the mic, the more you're going to become clear. A year into Holistic Hearts, my first podcast in 2020, I started to realize I really want to help coach people. I want to listen, and I want to stand in a place of holding space for people that are walking through health things, that are walking through marriage things, that are walking through parenting things. And so I started to think, you know what? I want to get a life coaching certification. So I went through that process. And while I was going through that, do you know what I wanted to do on Holistic Hearts in that season? Was to share what I was learning. And so I stepped more into a coaching, spiritual life coaching role in that season. And that is okay, because there is a common thread that started to develop, which was the holistic approach. It was, yes, talking about how we can get our head into our heart and our mind and our body and our spirit, and it can apply in our parenting, our marriage, and our business, in all of those areas. And I could help coach people what I was learning and what I was passionate about in that season. Then 2021 kept going, and I'm finishing out my education in coaching certification. And I realize I am still really passionate about podcasting and podcast coaching and helping other people. And people were coming to me and asking me lots of questions about how do you launch a podcast? How do you get it to Apple? All of these questions, right? And I had this moment of an epiphany of, wow, okay, this is how God wants me to bring in income to help support my original podcast, the ministry basically of Holistic Hearts. And so I began to really think, okay, if Holistic Hearts is my vessel on how I share what's going on in my heart for others to be empowered to connect with God, then what do I want to do in that space? And again, I started asking, how do I want to be present in my podcast in the season? It was still called Holistic Hearts at that time, still is, but I shifted again and I went even more narrow, and I started to record more episodes on specific encounters with Jesus. So without going too far into it, it's basically using your imagination or meditation to encounter Jesus. And I did a whole, I think it was about 8 months worth of weekly meditation encounters for people to experience Jesus. And that's what I did for that season, because that's where I felt like I wanted the platform to be used. So why am I telling you all this? Because you can pivot. You have permission to grow, to shift, to change, but you have to start. And sometimes it's just that next step forward. What is it right now? Just like I kept asking myself in every season, what do I want to be an expert in this season? And some of you, that might give you a little bit of heebie-jeebies, like, oh, who am I to call myself an expert? You are an expert. As somebody told me when I first started out Holistic Hearts, I was really like, oh, that just feels prideful. And somebody said to me, Kristin, you have walked at least one step further than somebody else, and they need to hear what you have to say. And so I'm going to say that to you as you are starting your podcast and you are unclear of where you're going. And I want you to ask the question of, what do you want to be an expert in this season? How can you help somebody else and make a difference in their life? What is the light that you are bringing and shining into somebody else's life, that they're one step behind you, 10 steps behind you, a mile behind you? Because this is important, is you get to take that brave step forward. So don't let the lack of clarity prevent you from moving forward, because there's ways that you can move through that. We can talk about, what are you passionate about? What are those things that you could, at the moment's notice, like I said at the beginning, talk about for hours? Maybe not hours, because that would be hard for me to do. Say for 15 minutes, what are those things that you could talk about? And the more that you're behind the mic, the more that you show up weekly, whatever your consistent schedule is, the more you're going to become clear. You'll hear feedback from listeners, or a lack of feedback from listeners, or you'll notice, wow, somebody really, really resonated with that. Maybe I should dig more into that. And that is okay. And sometimes too, like in my case, in the 3 years now that I've had Holistic Hearts podcast, my other podcast, I have shifted multiple times. And I knew that I needed to start another podcast all about podcasting. I didn't want to include it on Holistic Hearts because it really had nothing to do inside of that realm, right? And who knows where that will go. But I do know in this season, I have Holistic Hearts, which is my ministry-based experience of really spiritual life coaching, connecting our head and our heart, becoming a holistically wholehearted woman of God. And I have Holistic Podcasting, which you are listening to right now, which is for the podcaster who has yet to start, and for the podcaster who is in the middle of podcasting, who is feeling stuck, burnout, and ready to grow. So, permission, my friend, to just start, to move forward. And if you need extra help, if you need counseling, if you need counseling, you should go get counseling for sure. Big advocate there. But if you need coaching or consulting, please reach out. I would love to help you. And cheers to the process. It is all about the process. You will clarify your message, and you will continue to gain clarification on your podcast. All right. Cheers, you guys. Thanks for listening to Holistic Podcasting. I want you to know that I truly value every listen. To show my appreciation, I offer a one-on-one free podcast consultation call. Whether you're wanting to start a podcast or you're ready to take your podcast to a whole nother level, come sign up. The link is below, down in the show notes. Have a great day.